there's going to probably be others joining as we go, but I want to go ahead and kick off the call. And today's topic is tariffs, trade, and logistics. And with us, we have RJ Romano from BDO USA. And I had the pleasure to join another call with RJ about, I think it was 2 months ago. It seemed like it, at least. And very similar topic. I just felt like it was something that resonated well, and that we should definitely continue this discussion and with our group. And RJ has some pretty good extensive background in the global supply chain space. And RJ, if you want to go ahead and just kind of introduce yourself a little bit about your background, and then we'll kind of jump in from there.
Okay. Well, hello, everyone.
Hey, here we go.
Jim, thanks for having me. But yeah, my name is RJ Romano. I work with BDO, and I lead our supply chain advisory practice at BDO nationally. And my background specifically is all things supply chain operations. Went to school for supply chain and had the luxury of working in a lot of different supply chain verticals, whether it's procurement, sourcing, strategy, manufacturing, distribution, warehousing, transportation, logistics. I've kind of run the gamut from end-to-end supply chain throughout my career, and most of that has been in industry. And I only recently, maybe 5 years ago or so, jumped to the dark side of consulting, if you will. And yeah, my background, worked with a lot of different companies, both before consulting and obviously in consulting today. I always joke I've done everything from French fries to fishing lures to funeral caskets. So my background is quite unique, but our team as a whole, from a BDO perspective, are built around professionals like myself who have more expertise in industry and certain supply chain verticals. And we help companies, large and small, with supply chain needs and helping support them from either cost reduction to operational improvement to risk and resiliency, which obviously is a big topic right now from a supply chain perspective. So love to, again, appreciate you having me here, and love to talk all things supply chain. So looking forward to it.
Excellent. Yeah, interesting you brought up caskets. My foray into running my own third-party logistics company started out in a 2,500 square foot building, one client, and actually we were importing caskets from China. So that was yeah, interesting. So we have two things in common, RJ, importing and caskets and UPS. So I'll go ahead and start it off with a question, and then RJ, feel free to run with it.
Sure.
And as we said earlier, for those of you that weren't here, at 5:30, I do want this to be conversational. Michael is going to help to monitor the chat box, so please do not hesitate, and put your questions in there, and let's ask the questions that you would like to ask. Again, we've got an individual that has some expertise, but if you just kind of look at this screen, and I'm sure if you look at our backgrounds as a group, we have a combined expertise that's greater than probably 200 years plus worth of experience here. So it's a good group, good solid conversation. I hope that we all agree with at the end. And RJ, I think the one question that you and I had discussed, from the last discussion we had was, with the supply chain disruptions in today's marketplace, what are the number one concerns that you're hearing, from your customers? We can just kind of start there. And again, please, record your questions and we'll take them as we receive them.
Yeah, broadly, you guys have all seeing a lot of different things in the news around supply chain, whether it's a chip shortage or Suez Canal blockage. Like we don't have enough already with the pandemic. We have to deal with those things from a supply chain perspective as well. But I would say holistically, there's kind of 4 different areas that we are seeing the most conversation about, people calling us, helping or asking for help. And I would say right now it's starting to become probably the #1 issue, which is around workforce labor issues from a manufacturing and a distribution perspective. I would say, we can dive into the labor piece, I'm sure, but just from the boom of the e-commerce space and the need for more distribution warehouse employees, that obviously has put a strain on the labor force. And then manufacturing also because of demand and obviously a reduction or a less of a workforce out there from a manufacturing perspective, that is becoming ever increasing concern for a lot of manufacturers out there. It's what is keeping them up at nights when we're talking to a lot of manufacturers right now. Even if they have the opportunity to get the chips and meet demand, they're really struggling retaining people and bringing in new people to help fill those roles. And I would also say, being close to some different thought leadership out there, I've seen numbers around, there's an expectation that there's going to be, in manufacturing alone, 2 million open jobs by 2030. That's obviously a huge number, not to mention the driver shortage that has been ongoing for quite some time. We need people there as well. So, it's been quite an issue, and companies are trying to be creative on how they can combat that. I would say then the other piece is probably around what we're hearing a lot of is, I would say, the risk and resiliency piece of supply chain. So one way or another during COVID, companies got burned somehow. Either a supplier had to shut down, which disrupted their supply chain, Suez Canal issues, ocean freight capacity shortages. There's just been so many disruptions within the supply chain that companies are really focused on identifying where there's risk in their supply chain and trying to do everything they can to just have a more resilient supply chain, which means in most instances, spending a little bit more money to diversify where their manufacturing presence is, where they're getting their raw materials, or whether they're expanding to more supplier bases or diversifying their transportation. A lot of companies are really trying to focus on making a very resilient or risk adverse supply chain right now. And that can mean a lot of different things of how they go about combating that. But those are probably the top 2. And I would end with the third one around customer expectations. That pressure on supply chain is not going away. It's going to, if anything, get worse. People are expecting more products to be delivered on an Amazon type schedule than ever before. And so when companies have a lead time that is, 3 or 4 weeks, that's just not good enough anymore. And the expectation is going to continue to increase. And it puts a lot of strain on the speed of your supply chain. And in most instances, that means you need to have more inventory on hand. You need to have the ability to produce product quicker, have manufacturing or distribution footprints that are closer to the customer. All of those things add cost, and unfortunately, it's putting a lot of pressure on supply chain. So those three, I would say, are probably the top three that we have seen in some form or fashion that a lot of companies are kind of focused their attention on right now.
Well, let me follow up then with is there, somebody mentioned something in chat, Michael? If not, I'm going to jump in here. Let's touch on kind of the next question related to that. What are companies doing to combat this, labor shortage? And, you can touch on, the trucking sector, you can touch on, logistics as a whole, kind of your, somewhat, focus area, manufacturing and distribution. What are they doing? What can we do?
Yeah. It's quite a challenge. Rising minimum wage jobs out there. I could probably ask everyone on here if they have kids. Are we, pushing them to go to college and then have a manufacturing job? Probably not. So it's just very, it's very challenging. But I think a lot of at least from the manufacturing industry perspective, they are really putting a lot of emphasis on creating, I would say, prettier jobs, or the non-traditional ugly jobs that go along with warehouse operations or manufacturing. A lot of companies are transitioning their manufacturing and distribution operations to automated, technology-focused operations, which require a different skill set than ever before. And I think they're just trying to get that out to the market a little bit more to let people know that these aren't the traditional sling and metal kind of manufacturing jobs anymore. We need people that have a technology background, that can work in automated robots and automated technology that we see growing. And obviously, to that extent, a lot of companies are investing in a lot more technology and digital automation to help offset the need for more people, but it's not going away. The other area is a lot of, I'm on a couple of different manufacturing organizations, and they're really doing a lot of work with local high schools, local colleges, doing plant tours with high schools, just to get people in the door and see all the cool new things that they have inside the four walls of a plant than they had in recent years. And I think that will help with just getting more people or more kids that maybe decide they don't want to go to college and they want to try a trade school, or they want to focus on just working. There's a lot of opportunity there that we still need to kind of grow that exposure across the country. But the other piece is around the retention piece. We're hearing a lot of people jumping to other opportunities because there's maybe Amazon's offering a $2,000 bonus to bring someone into their distribution warehouse operations. Companies are really focused on driving that retention, increased training with the employees, trying to set them up for more of a career in manufacturing versus just a job in manufacturing. So there's a lot of different things. There's no silver bullet. Unfortunately, the supply out there is just not there. So we're going to constantly have this battle for quite some time. But the increasing automation and technology will help. The increased exposure to more schools and colleges of these non-ugly manufacturing and distribution jobs. That's very important. And obviously, keeping a hold of the people you have today is all things that companies are trying to really focus on. obviously, Jim, you could talk about the drivers, but whether it's, getting more women into the field, getting more younger folks into manufacturing and distribution, those are all things that we're trying to just pull every lever that we can right now to try to get as many people in the door as possible. So
there's really no
RJ,
silver bullet, RJ. I'm sorry. There's really no silver bullet. Is it exclusively pay, do you think? Is it primarily salary for drivers? Is it just the lack of interest? I mean, you have to wait till you're, I believe, 21 to get a CDL. In those 3 years or so, 2-3 years, are they choosing other career paths, perhaps another trade?
I think,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, I'll jump in. I think, from what I'm hearing and reading and staying on top of is, for someone that wants to truly become that long haul driver, there's a whole group between 18 and 21, right, that we just can't put on the road. But if there's some state legislation I know that they're looking at, I think Florida's definitely pushing, hard for tort reform and all kinds of other things. But it seems to me the grassroots has to start at the state level. We need to make sure that there's a way to engage that 18 to 21-year-old to get them into this particular field, logistics and transportation. And maybe it's running, box truck, short run, local routes just to start, right? And that's a place to get them moving along. And I had a conversation with another young individual starting, basically he's an entrepreneur with a startup, and that's exactly what he wants to do, is to kind of focus in on how to almost capture that workforce between 18 and 21, get them started in the field. And then when they do become 21 years old, if they choose that career path, kind of to your point, RJ, looking at it more as a longer term career. So 18 to 21, they're doing local, routes. They get to the age of 21, they start doing the longer haul. But all along the way, they're building a career. They've got a great safety record. They're going through the training. But the other piece of it is too, maybe along that way, someone may find that, I would rather be a manager of a distribution center. I would rather maybe manage the dispatch of the truck. So you're actually opening up their eyes and their minds to something other than just a long haul. And I think it is getting back to that younger group. Pay is always going to be something, Michael, I think, companies are going to steal drivers from one to the other. And, of course, the aging workforce that we have, the issues with, the drug and alcohol rehabilitation issues. I mean, this industry from a logistics and transportation, especially trucking, definitely needs to be revamped. And again, I think it's going to have to come from that state and local level. And then let's get this grassroots effort going to engage the younger audience. Anyone else have anything to add to that? Because I think it fits across all industry verticals. We're all having the same problem. And I think RG, you touched on it too. And I'll kind of let you guys jump in, but let's recruit, the female drivers. Let's look at, the international workforce and see who we can get to fulfill some of those needs. But that's two other areas that they are actively looking at.
We talk about state and local issues, and you look at California and AB5, where they want to relate it to owner operators. It's more of a challenge now, and it's even harder in California, where you have the biggest backlogs with the vessels in the queue to get into a berth.
Yep.
And you have the owner operator concern now, which eventually will end up in the U.S. Supreme Court, because the state courts have agreed with it. So it's going to be interesting. It's quite a challenge right now.
Hey, Jay, I like your comments, or Gary, I'm sorry, you've got here, American Rescue Plan, lame, paying people not to work, lame, ignoring inflation, lame. I think we all in some instances agree with that. And then Jay, you've got a note here. Is there a focus to produce and deliver more locally to combat the need for long haul drivers? I think we kind of touched on that. Anything else? What do you have any thoughts to add to that yourself, or? Good question.
No, I don't think so. Our company I was at previously, relied on trucks coming into the facility to deliver 40,000 pound steel coils. And I think that was a problem 2-3 years ago, if not further back, to get good drivers. And I think the long haul, was some of the issue, just, those, 8-hour shifts of just driving, monotony and some of that. I think there was overcoming some of that, and they weren't able to pay people enough to, fill the slots. But and I'm sure after COVID, it's even worse. But I've heard a lot about people now having to, because of COVID, having to depend on more local delivery. But again, I mean, you have to have the product to do that. So that's really all I had to add.
Got it. And I think you're right. And Mike, you kind of mentioned it, Michael, the pay. I did read something here recently too, that, there are some firms that are really evaluating it, not just to keep a driver in their company or, the butt in the seat, as they say. It's truly, they understand that, there's a lot of expenses, especially from the owner operator viewpoint, that, this is dollars out of their pocket, out of their business. And, they are being compensated more. And of course, right now with the demand the way it is, they are earning more, but hopefully they put some of that money back and to get them through some of those shortfalls. But I think in general, wages, for a driver, definitely, given a commitment that they have on the road, sometimes 3 weeks at a time. I mean, that's a tough haul. So I don't know, you've got a question there about feeling the effects of the Evergreen debacle. You want to kind of elaborate a little bit on that?
Just since we're talking logistics, just wondering how long I've read, 9 months to a year, just wanted to ask the expert in RJ and get his opinion.
Yeah, the Suez Canal impact, it's still ongoing. There's still containers sitting in port. The vessel is unloaded, but basically what people had to do during that time was just reorder the exact same material that was on that cargo container in the first place. So they've got that, hopefully, material already as that was sitting. So that is excess stuff there that is just still sitting, causing more delays for new product coming in there. They can't unload it all. Companies don't want it right now because it's a surplus. So it is quite literally a mess out there. And I've seen things saying that that stuff won't be cleared for at least till the summertime of next year. So I think it just dependent on, most people have already made changes to kind of figure out how to get that inventory that they were waiting on, or that product that they were waiting on. But they've already paid for it. It's sitting out there. They're getting charges for it, but some don't have anywhere to put it. Some can't get to some of the containers because the port is just completely congested. Some can't find stuff. So yeah, it's not going to clean up anytime soon, unfortunately. And so people have really tried to redirect a lot of freight to try to avoid that area for at least several months until maybe they can start making some headway there. But with Christmas season, shopping season right around the corner, it's just going to exacerbate the entire issue. And that's why they think summertime of next year is most likely when it's going to kind of clean up, because we're running into holiday season already. Can't believe it. So not a good answer for you, Hal. Sorry, I don't have that answer for you. But if I could figure that out and the chip shortage, I'd be sitting on a nice yacht somewhere for sure. But haven't quite got there yet.
Thanks anyhow.
I was going to ask a question, RJ, and again, this may not be your area of expertise, but you know how we had talked to Damon Pike, and Damon's also with BDO, and we were talking a little bit about the tax impacts. But the 25% tariffs that are being assessed in addition to the normal duties, you know, any comments around that?
Yeah, it's just, again, it's just add to the list of some of the disruption challenges that people are having to face. Luckily, most people who are thinking about possibly making a change from maybe having a manufacturing presence or a supplier presence in Asia, they've already started considering options to nearshore, whether maybe that's to Europe or another neighboring country, or bringing stuff all the way back to the US. Those people have already kind of started thinking through that a little bit more. And the tax incentives, the tariff incentives there really are a driving force, and go ahead and let's go down that path and start moving towards that. But we're seeing right now just a mix of everything. So companies are looking at, okay, I'm not going to pull 100% of my production out of Asia. I'm going to, you know, maybe pull 40%, and I'm going to move something to Europe. So it's close, but not close enough where I have to have it in the US, where maybe wages are a little bit higher than they would be in Europe. But my lead time is a little bit reduced, maybe for certain items that take a little bit longer to produce in China. Others are saying, you know, I'm going to do some in the US and some and keep some in Asia. So everyone's kind of looking at little different ways of attacking it, but really it's all about kind of diversifying it and not trying to have all your eggs in one basket anymore. It's just no longer the way of the world. And so, yeah, being aggressive there, trying to figure out opportunities to move your supply chain around, but incorporate the tax and tariff side is really what people are focused on. It's lead times, tariffs, taxes, anything they can get their hands on to try to reduce lead times and reduce costs, because they're just kind of, like I mentioned, going through the roof right now because people are just so afraid of their supply chain breaking that they're spending more in inventory, they're spending more in warehouse space, they're spending more in operational capital, technology improvements, etc. They're trying to squeeze out any cost savings they can to pay for that kind of stuff. So,
Michael, there's a couple questions there. One's from Vivian and Lynn. Want to address those?
Or RJ, I was reading where that logistically there's software and tracking available to get more trucks on rails to and probably alleviate some of the long haul strain. Is that more of an option these days to, you know, alleviate some of the labor pressures?
Yeah, that's been ongoing for quite some time. People really trying to leverage intermodal and rail as much as possible. But you know, to the extent that you can, a lot of companies are already doing it, but there's a lot of companies that just don't have that opportunity. The lead time is just too long for some of that product and material. But I would say, yeah, that's one of many other opportunities to kind of lower the need for truck drivers, is to leverage that. But until they also are having really some major constraints with boxes and shortages. So having intermodal box going from California to Chicago, well, that box, that container is now sitting in Chicago inland for quite some time. They're really struggling trying to find ways to get those boxes from inland to the ports, back to the ports, so that they can be used for the next one. It's just kind of a cycle that right now has been tough. But for anyone that I would say, for anyone that has the ability to diversify their freight away from everything being truckload, long haul, using regional carriers, using intermodal, using rail, using air freight if you have to, taking that pressure off of the long haul fleet and need there, definitely pull those triggers when you have it and you have the availability to do so. It's because it's, yeah, that constraint is still, it's still hard to get your arms around. So, yeah.
RJ, a question came in about cyber. All cyber issues need to be addressed. What are you seeing in that space, with whether it's with your clients, whether it's, what you're hearing in the ear to the ground type?
Yeah, that one has been interesting. From a supply, so looking at it from a supply chain perspective, it kind of falls into this bucket of, so I would say 2 years ago, everything from a supply chain perspective was all around, how do I do things cheaper? How do I make my supply chain more efficient? How do I just take costs out completely? It's completely flipped now, where it's no longer about the cost predominantly, it's all about the risk to my supply chain. So if I find out that I have a group of risky suppliers, well, guess what? They are going after that with a full supplier risk assessment. They're looking at every supplier. They're looking for backups to the backup suppliers. They're doing everything they can to figure out these plans or continuity plans to limit or have a plan for when a risk event happens. And I would say cybersecurity is probably way up there from a supply chain perspective, because how much these companies are relying so much on technology, their ERPs, their WMS systems, their TMS systems, transportation management systems. All of those are kind of speaking the same language. They're relying heavily on data right now to be their predictive engine, predictive tool, to be able to kind of figure out how much I should order for inventory, what should my, safety stock look like, things of that nature. That the cybersecurity piece is of utmost importance, because if the systems break, typically the supply chain will break as well. And we're working with a huge company right now that manages supply chain for pretty much every major food restaurant company that you can think of. And the reason why we're there is to create these supply chain risk plans that their clients, who are big clients, are saying, what happens if your supply chain breaks? What happens if you have a cybersecurity attack? What happens to our supply chain? And so they're getting a lot of pressure to say, okay, if that happens, here's my plan. If this happens, here's my plan. And so it's it's kind of a very unique conversation right now when we're talking about supply chain with companies. Some are still have the ability to focus on costs and operational efficiency improvement. Others are focused all about this risk element and trying to figure out how to have a resilient supply chain, whether it's cyber or a pandemic, all kinds of things. So, yeah.
Excellent question, Vivian. Thank you. When it comes to, kind of piggybacking off of that, now let's kind of take it forward. I like your thought. I never really kind of put it in perspective that way, how things have kind of flipped, if you will, right, to manage risk, which, at the end of the day, any business, you should always kind of have that in mind. But now it's being a priority. What are the headwinds, and, what can we see that either, could affect this supply chain industry, whether it's, technology, there's a lot of disruption going on. It's kind of a big question, but, if you had to shake up your magic 8-ball, what do you see?
Yeah, that's interesting. Obviously, I mentioned labor is still going to be an issue for years to come. That's not going away. So the one thing, I was on a call the other day with a pretty large company, and it wasn't just about the labor issues that this CEO was concerned about. She was also concerned about the lack of connectivity between her supply chain teams throughout the corporation. So typically, if I'm in the production planning group, I could have easily went out into the production plan and talked to the plant manager about production issues or something to that effect. Well, now that everyone is remote and some people are in the office, some people are not, she was really concerned about her supply chain departments not collaborating and talking like they normally do in a normal environment. And she's already seeing some issues of just that attention to detail that isn't there anymore. And she thinks if that continues, it's going to get worse and worse across her supply chains. Maybe they start, adding more inventory here or there. Maybe they're not being able to have their production plans as tight as what they used to, or sales and production aren't talking like they usually don't ever before, but now it's even worse. It's just that piece of it, I think, is kind of a spin to the labor piece that I think I'm hoping here soon that we get past this Delta variant and everything, and we can start kind of getting back to normal. But I hear a lot of people that working from home, that's going to be a new normal. And what does that impact have on your company when these supply chain groups are so interconnected that being disconnected from each other personally, how that impact will have on supply chains for years to come? It's kind of hard to tell, but I'm a little concerned about that one. I thought that was a great call out by that CEO. But other than that, I think it's really around the focus on the customer expectations piece. Again, I think that is putting a lot of pressure on supply chains. I can think of, the automotive industry. You could never get a car without going to a dealership. Now I can go on my phone and literally order a car and it'll show up tomorrow at my house. Like that type of a supply chain for automotive, like that's kind of unheard of, that we're putting that much pressure on the automotive industry alone to be able to produce vehicles and have demand at the ready for me if I decide to order something from my phone. That is just one example of how much pressure these different industries have from a customer expectation that we're putting on them. And we're not really, companies aren't really passing along those costs quite yet to the customer based on those expectations, but maybe it'll happen. But a lot of Amazon, for example, they spend, they lose $100 billion in costs trying to deliver this 2-day service model, but it's a service requirement. It's a competitive advantage that they know it's worth that investment. So yeah, I think that headwind is going to continue to stay with us for quite some time. And yeah, I would say the other one is just around, I would say, yeah, the conversation around nearshoring, onshoring. Where do I put my plants? Where do I put my warehouses to support my customer? We're seeing a lot of, we have the tool at BDO, this whole digital supply chain, supply chain twin is what they're calling it, where they basically have their supply chain mapped out digitally, and I can then pull a lever over here in the system and I can see the ripple effect of my supply chain, and I can start kind of doing different things to figure out what should my supply chain look like. How do I simulate an event like a labor strike or a hurricane or a Suez Canal blockage, and I can simulate my supply chain digitally to see and pressure test my supply chain to figure out how it'll be impacted. That is kind of a new age technology that companies are really focused on trying to understand. And the increasing of technology and the increasing of data is all a good thing, but we got to figure out how to leverage it and use it. We've made some good strides there, but that's that whole technology automation piece, data piece, I think will be I wouldn't say a headwind, but it would be an area of focus for a lot of companies moving forward as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think, there's a lot of good SaaS companies that are out there that it's awesome. I mean, they can plug in to an existing ERP system and not within months, or years, but within weeks and months, they can actually have a working model up and running and ready in place. So yeah, for those of you, I know part of my search when I was out, looking for the next opportunity, I probably spent 3 to 4 weeks just researching, the disruptors that are out there in the marketplace. And there's some interesting things going on. DLT Labs is one. They had a great introduction of an offering that it was Walmart of Canada and Bison Transport. And, the error frequency on the invoice processing was reduced, by 97% by adding in, and everybody's talking about smart contracts and blockchain, but at the end of the day, it was just pure automation that allowed them to improve the processing time and reduce the cost to process an invoice. So many, many, many examples of that. Another comment was made, and Gary, appreciate all your input too. When it comes to rising costs, for example, you had mentioned the high cube container cost has risen from $3,600 to $6,000. The other thing that I read the other day, and RJ, I don't know if you caught this, but it was one of the ocean liner companies where their gross margins are just off the charts. Did you catch that? Did anybody else read that? I mean, there's going to be some backlash, it seems, coming from that. Again, I don't know if you have any commentary to it, but just, it seems like in this time that of demand, that the rates that we're being charged are just excessive. Again, I don't know if you saw that or not.
I think the 36 to 6,000 is kind of cheap. I've read where it's exceeding 15 to 20,000 for a container from China to the West Coast.
Mhm.
So it's pretty good. Carriers are doing great. My prior life, I was on the ocean side, and I know, what they're really reaping the benefit now.
Mhm. Yeah, it was just crazy. Michael, I think to your point, and Gary, I have a customer that I'm looking at right now, and I think we're looking at their invoices, and they're the 11,000 plus range. We just did a very small sample, and I think we're going to find that it could be in that 15,000 plus, which we're talking one container. It's pretty crazy. Vivian, you've got a question. We've allowed China to supply us with everything, and now China seizes the opportunity to charge us whatever they can. And now they've become the sole suppliers, which I think, RJ, you kind of touched on that, where, we are making some adjustments to that. Anything else to add, or Vivian, any more additional commentary you want to add to that point? Yeah, you're on mute, Vivian. Sorry.
Yes, I think we have learned a few lessons over time by allowing China to supply us with everything because it's cheap, but they can really turn things around where they can change the rules and say when they want to, whatever they want to charge us at whatever time. I mean, they become the monopoly. They have become the monopoly, and they know that we will pay whatever they can ask us because we need it, and there is nobody else out there. And I think it's dangerous, especially in pharmaceuticals, medical, in resources, certain resources that are essential. We should learn a lesson. The United States should learn that we have to go back to our own people right here in the US and help them on how we can diversify the marketplace. I think it's extremely dangerous to let one country or one part of the world manufacture and dictate to us when and how much they can charge us, and we have nowhere else to go.
Any commentary there, RJ?
Yeah, I agree completely. We years ago we pushed, we focused on a cheap supply chain, knowing that we would have long lead times, less control, but we went after cost, and we're surprised now that all of a sudden, when China shuts down, our supply chain breaks. Obviously thinking back, we were asking for it. And so, yeah, we just have to do what we can right now to leverage China when it makes sense, or Asia when it makes sense, but try to really diversify and bring product closer to home, closer to the clients, whether it's maybe, like I said, maybe not all the way back to the US, maybe it's Europe, maybe it's Mexico, whatever it might be. We got to do different things to really just kind of diversify that portfolio a little bit more. And really for the companies, it's just getting more control over the supply chain. When you have something that's sitting in China, it takes 60 days to get here. Like, what are you going to do? You have very limited options. You have very limited control. And that's where everyone got burnt over COVID, when China shut down and they didn't have other suppliers. They don't have other options. They were relying solely so much on China. So yeah, not surprised. I'm sure people in the future were laughing at us when we decided to push everything that way, knowing that this could happen. But yeah, we're here now. We got to figure it out. And I think we just got to, diversify that and bring things back for sure. So.
Hey, Michael, looks like we had a couple more questions.
Yeah,
one from
Gary's got a comment, or we can discuss. U.S. exporters are suffering. There's so much demand from China that ships leave the U.S. West Coast loaded with empties to rush them back to China to start the cycle over again.
Yep.
No time to wait for U.S. exporters to load their cargo, so they are left out in the cold. I do recall, Gary, this was also a topic of one of a recent FMC hearings in DC. I know, RJ, if there's any thoughts you may have on this topic, but I know it's important, a very important topic.
Yeah, no, it's I think as a country, we do 75 billion in international trade, and majority of it is imports. And so, yeah, completely what Gary said. There are empty ships going back to China. That's how much of an imbalance we have trying to get that freight back over here. And so, to the extent that exporters are suffering, yeah, I'm sure they are, but there's still a lot of freight that they're still handling. It just, I know that those types of situations don't help the bottom line for sure, but it just speaks to the imbalance we have as a country that we need to start, figuring out. Would love to not send empty vessels to China, but the more we can bring that product here, the more hopefully we can start leveraging our resources and moving that freight and production elsewhere. But unless companies are willing to just start over and sit on product out there that they've already paid for, obviously that's not going to happen. But we just got to, companies are really recognizing the imbalance here, and they're going to hopefully start working on bringing that production back over here. So
I think to go along with that, another question was, from a data perspective, are companies starting to use blockchain to facilitate shipment and payment tracking? There are companies, and I kind of briefly mentioned it, a company called DLT Labs. Of course, what they tried to do was, in fact, use a blockchain and smart contract model to help facilitate the payments. Now, so much on the tracking, I'm not sure about that, but there's another group out there that I know I personally have been researching, and it was called Steam Chain Corp. And they're not using the true crypto as we all kind of know it in today's marketplace, but they're using what's called C-coin. And that in fact is a very stable way to basically exchange currency outside of the normal banking institutions. So there are companies out there doing that. I don't know all of them, but definitely it's happening. It's just a matter of what's the comfort level with a company engaging in smart contracts and blockchain technology. But for the example that I gave you with the Bison Transport and Walmarts of Canada, I mean, using a SaaS-based technology, the process was implemented within, I think, 3 months. So it is definitely something happening and something to pay attention to. And Michael, there's another question from John. Did you see that one?
Yeah, I do. Hey, John. John's question, are there any standout SAS providers who optimize networks for consolidators with multiple locations and are innovative in the blockchain space to connect supply chains? I guess to your point earlier, Jim, but RJ, any thoughts on that? Jim, any comment from your side?
Go ahead, RJ.
Well, I was just going to say that there are providers out there that provide what I would call this network optimization design element to their platform. And then that kind of feeds into this whole supply chain digital twin where you can leverage blockchain and different, I would say, AI data that could be captured from your supply chain. The tricky part is where you are on that journey of how much data do you have for your supply chain? Are you getting data feeds from all of your carriers? Are you getting data feeds from your suppliers? Are you getting data feeds from your manufacturing plant and IoT technology? There's a lot of data out there. Not many people are actually capturing it all yet and leveraging it. But from as far as your question is concerned, there are providers out there that will leverage that data that you're capturing in your supply chain, pushing it into a network optimization engine where you can then kind of see your supply chain in real life, and you can see the movements of product and materials, costs even, and then that is what you can leverage to kind of pressure test your supply chain or figure out, okay, this is what my supply chain looks like today. What if I move my plant from China to the US? What would it look like? What would my operating costs be? What would my capital investment need to be? All of that information, again, that's leveraging this data that we have available to us, but not everyone has that extensive data to do a full digital twin. It can be quite a journey from that perspective. But there's a lot of different providers out there, and if I have a couple that I can pass along if you're interested, if you wanted to contact them or reach out.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. Specifically what we're looking for is a provider with a broad reach to cover, a broad reach of transportation providers to support a network of consolidation facilities to determine where best to route a product at the last minute. With the volatility in the supply chains, with with the constraint on capacity, means that things change at the last possible moment, and it renders the load optimization that's been reviewed and put into effect completely obsolete because product's not on site. So we need something that works more quickly. And so for that, we're looking for what the best technologies that are going to be in place in probably 2 or 3 years as we start to make that investment. So as any names of places, we've seen a lot of RF, we've seen a lot of demonstrations from a number of TMS providers. And I'm not sure we really want to take a good critical look because it's a pretty big investment, to go in, not so much on the money side, but on the time side, to settle in with a TMS. It's not something you want to change once you've done it. So
yeah, that's for sure. Hey, RJ, if you want to drop your contact information out there on the chat box,
Okay.
That way, individuals could grab it. And John, if you want to reconnect, I sent you, my information too. I mean, be more than happy to, point you in the right direction. Okay.
Thanks.
And that's the other thing too about this group. There are things that are going to come up, whether it's, a given day, a given week, a given month, just a given problem, for sure, bring those to the table and let's kind of, chat about them. Michael and I can, bring them up as a topic of discussion for future, just, we can do it on a monthly call. We could just do like an impromptu call. But please, keep Michael and I in the loop on those types of questions. And, you can either share with the group yourself or we'll help you facilitate that. Okay. Because that's part of what we want this to be. All right. How we can help each other. And Gary, I like your comments. I see what you meant. That 6,000 was to purchase the actual box from the manufacturer, the 40-foot dry container, and then lease it out. And the difference.
I misunderstood that earlier.
No, I did too. I did too.
Apologies, Gary.
I did too. I was the same. So yeah, I get it. You're absolutely right. So, and I think that's just the situation that we're all dealing with. I think Vivian, you kind of touched on it. There are situations where certain entities are taking advantage of kind of what we're all dealing with. And hate to say it, even in the parcel world, look at what FedEx and UPS are doing right now during peak season surcharges. It's astounding. And kind of take a look at what their profit margins are and what's going on. Now, granted, I mean, they're a publicly traded institution. They are doing what's in the best interest of their shareholders. I cannot fault them for that. But I think by us as consumers of their product having limitations in the number of choices that we have, there is an issue there, right? RJ, you brought it up. Using regionals, there are some great regional parcel carrier providers out there. If you do not know of them, I've got a list of about 12 of them. Now, they are regional in nature, but they are doing some great things. They have great technology. I just wish they would work together. They're not quite ready to do that yet because they're all privately held entities, but take advantage of it. Talk about lead time. RJ, you kind of brought that up. On the USPS, same thing. They do have a great parcel service offering that is coming out. I mean, granted, they were built on the backbone of a mail envelope delivery service, but they are trying to transition. And if you haven't noticed, you'll start seeing UPS style box trucks out in the field now with the USPS logo on it. So many good things happen. But with it, we've got to deal with cases just like Gary brought up. Until we embrace those options, we are limited by choice because we are helping them out by making that limited choice, right? They're holding us captive. So, we have to venture out. John, your point, I think it's great, figure out a way to do things better, utilizing SaaS models. It's great to have a model, but if you can't work with it on the fly, right? And make those adjustments when you need to, it's only as good as, the information that's in it and the limitations that you've built within that. But these SaaS models, SaaS companies, flexible, nimble, and able to get you some solutions in a few months. I'm going to kind of give RJ the last floor here, and then I'll open it up for those of us that kind of want to stick around the last 15 minutes and just if somebody wants to introduce themselves and talk about your current role and what you're looking for because of transition, I would like to at least allow some time for that at the end here. But RJ, you want to wrap us up with anything?
No, I just want to say thanks for having me, everyone. I added my information in the chat box. Feel free to reach out to me if you have questions. But no, this was a great discussion. I think we all agree that there's quite a lot going on in the supply chain world, and to the extent that you need, obviously, some assistance, glad to help in any way I can. But great having the conversation with you all, and appreciate Jim, Michael, thanks for the invitation.
All right. Well, RJ, thanks for joining. We truly appreciate it. Okay. And we'll talk to you later.
Okay. Take care, everyone. Thanks a lot.